Hello, longevity enthusiasts. This is Cody Hazelbaker, and this is the Immortalist, where the goal is to live free and to live forever. This is the first episode, and I was supposed to have a whole set in studio here with a banner behind me, but because of Hurricane Milton, that was not totally possible. I have some repairs to do, so you see this little square right here. Just imagine that's really big behind me, and that's what it's supposed to look like. So this is our first episode. It's very exciting. We've got a lot of things coming down the track, which is it's going to be fun to see. So my name is Cody Hazelbaker. I'm not a research scientist. I'm not some genius guy working in the longevity field. I'm just a normal person, like a lot of you. Um, I run an enterprise with a family company. My uncle's involved as well, and it includes a plumbing company. So, I've been out there unclogging toilets and doing that sort of thing. So just a normal guy here, not a genius. But I want to live. That's why I'm here doing this channel. I have a desire to live, and I want to live as long as I want to live. I don't want to have to die. To me, that's really important, and I know there's a lot of people around the world who feel the same way. So that's who I am, a little bit of my background. But why am I starting this channel? Am I just one guy that decided to start a channel and spout off? No. I have a support of a project, it's a network state project called Immortalis. And actually, later on this show, I'm going to bring up kind of the project lead of Immortalis. His name is Wallace Hamilton, and he's going to talk a little bit more about that. But I've been in contact with him and with other people on that team, and have been given the go-ahead to start this channel and to start that voice, in the public front. We see a lot of little individual groups around the world, and I'm sure many of you have seen them as well. If you're on this channel, it's probably because you're interested in longevity and you've done homework already. But there's a lot of groups around the world that are working towards curing death in one form or another, whether it's transhumanism, whether it's a pill, or telomere lengthening, or any of these kind of things. And what we're realizing is that for this to work and for it to work faster, we've got to unify the voice. We have a bunch of individual voices in smaller groups, but we need to bring it all together because we all want the same thing. We all want to live. So if we can unify that and have one really loud voice, progress is going to happen so much faster on all these fronts that everyone's working. Because all the projects everyone's working on in the longevity field are very important. We know through scientific research that shortening of the telomeres as cells divide, that once the telomeres get too short, your cells can't divide anymore, and your cells get old and become senescent, and you die. So that's an important area of research, but that's only one. You also have mitochondrial things and stem cell things. There's a lot to work with here. I think Wallace just popped in live. Hi, Wallace.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Hey, Cody. How's it going?
Oh, I don't hear you, Wallace.
Okay. Let's see.
Anyways, while you're working on that, I'll kind of keep going here with the introduction. So yeah, there's a lot of different projects in the longevity field that are all very important. Stem cells, telomeres, and there's the whole psychological side of it too, of people wanting to live. It's the whole idea of supply and demand. The demand has to be there in order for the supply to be presented. And what we want is a commercially available cure to death and longevity. So I'm involved with the Immortalis project, and Wallace, who just popped back out, hopefully he comes back in with his sound working. I'm going to bring him on, and he's going to talk a little bit more about the Immortalis project, which is starting out as a network state, but the background behind that. This is not a brand new thing. There's decades of development, 5 or 6 decades before now, of developing kind of the social psychologies that are going to be necessary to make this happen. So, Wallace, is your sound working?
Let's see. Can you hear me now?
I do not hear you. I wonder if it's just on my end.
Okay. Well,
Say
I can
something
hear you,
again.
so you should be able to hear me.
I'm not hearing you at all.
Okay. Let's.
Maybe, I wonder if anyone else is watching live and can tell me if they hear you. Maybe it is just me.
Yeah, is there. If anyone can hear me, just write in the comments. Hello, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can't hear you at all, Wallace. And I can't find any settings to see. Um, no, I saw
Hello,
you push the mute
hello.
button and then unmute yourself. You should be unmuted, but
Yeah. Okay. Let's try another thing. Mm-mm. It's just this software. Let's see. I'm gonna check.
all right, try saying something again.
Hello,
Oh,
hello.
I hear you
Can you
now,
hear me
actually.
now?
I do hear you.
Oh, you
Can
do?
you still hear me the same way?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, perfect. We'll continue on then.
Yes.
Well, I gave you a little bit of an introduction, and so Wallace, if you want to talk about the Immortalis project, kind of where it's going, where it is now, and a little bit about the background of it, take it away.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me on, Cody. And so I want to premise the introduction to Immortalis and what we're doing with an observation that oftentimes some of the greatest breakthroughs come from the simplest identifications or observances. For example, Archimedes sitting in the bathtub and seeing the water rise in his eureka moment for hydrostatics, and Newton with the apple falling to the ground, and from that came gravity. And so my father believes in something so simple as well from an observance. He's observed that every single avenue that's blocked progress, whether it be from business, science, research, and funding from going to the next level, in the end, if it's not outright incompetence, it always links back to initiatory force in one form or another. An initiatory force comes from natural law that states no adult should be able to initiate force on another. No group, no government, no other individual can initiate force on somebody else. And so my grandfather experienced this firsthand when he was working at DuPont as a top scientist there. Him and his team were on track to discovering a very promising cancer treatment. But the regulations were way too cost prohibitive to pursue it. And it would drag things out and it would take way too long to be able to pursue a promising cure to cancer. And this was back over half century ago, 65, between 65 and 70 years ago. And as it relates to funding, the regulatory drag from initiatory force greatly reduces potential ROI, and which increases the potential of failure. And so investors in funding things such as research for anti-aging and longevity With the regulatory drag, it becomes too cost prohibitive and reduces them from wanting to invest in these things, because costs are much higher and they don't want to invest because of ROI odds. And outright regulations from force back regulations, they're so great that people just can't move ahead and get the progress that we need in these areas. They just kill projects. For example, Elon Musk is saying there's no way we could possibly go to Mars with all the regulations holding back progress. I met a researcher in the researching a promising anti-aging avenue who's saying that their progress is being blocked and they need a place where there's not all these forced back regulations holding back and stopping progress. And at that point, funding starts to fall apart for these promising avenues. And the regulations became so great that it killed a promising cure to cancer that my grandfather was going to work on. And so, with that direct experience with initiatory force from my grandfather, it was a factor that had him that led to a discovery. My father developed a philosophy, or more accurately, an idea system that grew out of Ayn Rand's objectivism. And in there, he identified mankind's greatest responsibility is to preserve conscious human life. And that was over a half century ago, about 65 years ago. And out of that idea system grew my father's work, Neothink, which is taking those ideas and applying them to the real world. And my father realized that the way to eventually achieve mankind's greatest responsibility is two parts. The first part is make people's lives so great that they want to live forever. And then, which is dealing with the psychological component and emotional component to be able to accept what anti-aging and biological immortality actually means. And then on the other side is to allow the societal conditions for progress and technology to be able to advance rapidly enough to be able to achieve that cure. And so, coming from the societal standpoint, he identified the biggest blocker for progress all comes down to initiatory force. And so, with the societal conditions of allowing researchers and scientists and market businessmen to be able to create and produce breakthroughs in technology and research, we need to create the conditions where they can be able to pursue their research without having anyone breathing down their necks or slowing down or blocking progress. And the way through initiatory force or force back regulations, litigation, and so on. And therefore, he identified how to remove initiatory force from society, which is a prime law, and which is the fundamental law of protection, which banishes initiatory force from society, from individuals, from initiating force against each other, and from governments and other groups to be able to initiate force against anybody else. And so the prime law pretty much states no person, groups of persons, or individuals can initiate force on anybody else or their property or contract. And the prime law, if it becomes the supreme law of a nation, then that would completely change the paradigm of governance, which would establish society as a mutual value exchange, and there'd really be no ruling class. And so at that point, researchers and scientists and market businessmen would be able to create values and innovate much more rapidly. And so that's where Immortalis comes in, which is our actual application of the prime law, which banishes initiatory force. So Immortalis, our goals with Immortalis is to create an actual society, to create a container where people can come to pursue their passions and their research, to pursue their own happiness, to without having anybody else or government be able to hold them back or stop them. And so Immortalis is going to be the place that guarantees those conditions where there will be no initiatory force. And we want to make people aware of that and invite people into Immortalis, because then they can proceed and they can do what they need to do to make progress. And we are offering them protection so they don't need to, so their progress isn't blocked, so they can achieve rapid breakthroughs and technological advancements, so they could achieve funding, so there'd be a higher return on investment and more funding going into these avenues, because now they can achieve these breakthroughs much faster. And so that kind of sums up what our approach is and what Immortalis is, where kind of our history, where it came from. And so with Immortalis, we're starting off as a startup society using the whole, we got our inspiration from Balaji, who wrote the book Network State, on how to basically create new countries in the modern era. And so we're starting as a startup nation at the moment, and our goals is to crowdfund and purchase land, and eventually get recognized with sovereignty and establish the prime law, which banishes initiatory force, as our constitution.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Wallace. You were talking about the prime law. That would be the Constitution of Immortalis. Do I have that right?
Yes, it would be the Constitution of Immortalis, which banishes initiatory force, which has never been seen before throughout all civilizations that have existed.
Okay, I actually found a copy of that, and I'll read it out just that way the viewers can have exactly what that is and start kind of rolling that around in their mind and imagine what that would be like. So it starts out, I have a little bookmark, it's really old. It says the prime law, which is the fundamental of protection. The preamble is the purpose of human life is to prosper and live happily. The function of government is to provide the conditions that let individuals fulfill that purpose. The prime law guarantees those conditions by forbidding the use of initiatory force, fraud, or coercion by any person or group against any individual, property, or contract. Article 1. No person, group of persons, or government shall initiate force, threat of force, or fraud against any individual's self, property, or contract. Article 2. Force is morally and legally justified only for protection from those who violate Article 1. Article 3. No exceptions shall exist for Articles 1 and 2. So, to me, this seems like the filter that every law and regulation would have to go through in order to be ratified into law in a given country. So, in my mind, and you can speak on this if you want, this would be kind of the overarching law or the Constitution, really, and there would be other rules and regulations put in place for more specific things, like intellectual property rights and things like that. But all of those regulations would be filtered through this Constitution. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, absolutely. It would be the Constitution, the supreme law of the nation. and all other laws or agreements would have to be under the prime law, and there could be no initiation of force.
Okay. So yeah, I'm fully on board with that. I think that's the best thing since the American Constitution, which some could say it's almost perfect, and maybe as far as Earth's history goes, maybe it's the most perfect thing that humans have come up with. But I think this prime law or the Constitution of Immortalis is that next evolution. It's probably a little more perfect. I think I'm fully behind on that.
Yeah, and the Constitution has done an excellent job as um, up up to now, and but the issue and the Constitution almost had it right. The Constitution of the United States led to the greatest country that's ever existed on planet Earth, of America. Yet now we see what's happening. We see that even with one of the greatest documents that's ever existed, creating a whole new way of governance with the Constitution, how eventually, and there's a vicious cycle that's going on, a vicious cycle that we've seen throughout human civilization since the beginning. And that vicious cycle is that the rule of man, an initiatory force, eventually creeps its way into government and corrupts and destroys that country or that nation from the inside. And we see what's going on in America now and why the Constitution is crumbling. And that all stems from initiatory force. That you have your leaders in government that are able to use initiatory force to destroy this country, to pass regulations, force back regulations that eventually end in bankrupting our nation, that end in leading us into wars, that end up um, that end up not that end up allowing people to almost invade this country. And so the corruption of America and even the fall of Rome, country that you can every country that's fallen throughout civilization has a common denominator with the rule of man and initiatory force. And it's almost inevitable that that corruption will happen. The average lifespan of any country is surprisingly 150 years. And why do countries fall? It's because the rule of man and initiatory force find their way and creep their way in and destroy and corrupt the country from within. And so we've never experienced a nation or a form of governance that banishes the rule of man and initiatory force before. And that's what the prime law aims to achieve, to stop that vicious cycle of eventual corruption and tyranny once and for all.
Fantastic. And yeah, it's an amazing thing. And I forget which founding father of the United States it was, but and maybe this is wrong. I should check my facts on this. But I feel like I've heard that one of them even said, uh, after the writing of the Constitution and the Declaration, that even they realized it was not quite perfect. It was the best they could do at the time, but they could have done better. I don't know if you've heard that as well.
Yes, I know also the famous quote of Benjamin Franklin when they came out after creating the Constitution, and they asked, "What government have you given us?" And Benjamin Franklin said, "A republic, if you can keep it." And that was
Ooh,
all on the minds of our founding fathers. They feared that eventually something would come in and corrupt that. They did the best they possibly could, but they all knew that there was a potential inevitability of it failing. And we see that now. It held strong for over 200, almost 250 years now. And so it's held strong, but they all knew something would get in there to ruin it and corrupt it. And my father identified what that thing is, and that's initiatory force and the corrupt rule of man. And so with the
Yes.
prime law almost finishes what the founding fathers started. It creates a permanent not just a long-term solution, but a permanent solution that completely gets rid of the only thing that can come in there and destroy a nation and corrupt a nation, which is initiatory force in the rule of man.
Right. So saying the rule of man, having this prime law as the filter that all rules and laws have to go through, to me, this uh, kind of goes into shifting away from the rule of man into rule of law, the law being the prime law, because everything has to filter through that. So any imperfect human, because we're all imperfect, that gets into a position of power and government, if they get power hungry and try to do crazy things, they can try to establish whatever law or regulation they want, but it has to filter through the prime law. And if it doesn't pass through that filter of not being initiatory force, not being fraud, or not coercing people to do things, then it doesn't get ratified and it's just tossed out. So really, this is the filter that it makes it doesn't matter who's in power, because whatever they do is filtered through the rule of law. And I think that's a beautiful concept that, like you said, it's the missing element that the founding fathers of the United States didn't have and realized they didn't have. So we're finally on that cusp of evolving as a human society to that next level, and it's a really exciting time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and people don't fully understand or emotionally um, understand what this actually means, because the you can say, every single person agrees. My father talks about a concept called the obvious theory, that when there's something so simple, um, and when something, it's almost like Ayn Rand had a major breakthrough in philosophy, where she came up with the line, "Existence exists." And when somebody hears that, they go, "Oh, so obvious. I could have said that. I could have thought of that." Yet it took her entire life, her entire development of her philosophy of objectivism to be able to say that. So the sentence, "existence exists," that's two words. Yet it took her entire lifetime of works to be able to develop that. And so relating that to the prime law and initiatory force, everybody agrees, no matter who you are, everybody agrees that one person shouldn't have the power to force another person to do anything that he or she doesn't want to do. Everybody agrees with that, unless maybe you're a dictator, because that cuts off the root to your power. And so, with the prime law of banishing initiatory force and making that universal axiom the law of the land, that somebody or another entity, a company or government, can't force other individuals, companies, or governments to do anything they don't want to do. Um, and with the prime law as actually banishing that, it's so simple. It's so simple. Yet it took, my father and my grandfather 60 years to develop that, the prime law. And but and so what that would actually mean in practice of banishing initiatory force, because people don't necessarily emotionally understand what that would do. And so I'd like to draw an analogy to the computer industry. And the computer industry was a very unregulated industry. And what we saw, because people were able to innovate and rapidly advance and create breakthroughs in technology, we saw it would be, Bill Gates has a quote that says something like, the price um, for the computing power that we have today, the um, it used to cost, it would be like buying a Boeing 747 for the price of a pizza, 20 years ago or so. That's how rapidly uh, people can advance, and researchers and scientists and businesses, that's how fast they can advance if they're not held back. And um, Peter Thiel was on Joe Rogan recently, and he expressed a similar concept where he said that when he was in school, when he was, I believe, in college, there were all the different engineering fields that you could get into. Um, and computer science was actually kind of, he said was, I may be misquoting him, but he said something like it was the laughing stock. It had the least potential breakthrough. And yet he said, now that's the only field people go into. But why? Why were the other engineering fields like nuclear, biological engineering, why were those um, why aren't those huge now? And where do we see the end result or the potential of those? Well, it's because the regulatory state has essentially killed all progress in those industries. And so the one industry that initiatory force, or that the rule of man didn't fully get their hands on, was able to create everything, so much of what we saw today, what we experience and use on a daily basis with technology, with the internet. And so imagine the rapid development and advancement of that happened in the tech industry, in all other industries, in energy and power, in uh, biotech, in health and anti-aging and longevity research. It's almost unfathomable of how what type of civilization we can enter if progress wasn't blocked or held back. And we would experience true abundance for the first time. And that is something that once people see and understand, that it will get you so excited about. And once you fully understand initiatory force and uh, preventing the rule of man from blocking progress, then one, it's so obvious and clear, and two, you'll there will be a like you'll get so excited about it and wonder, why isn't this already here? And that's why we created Immortalis, to bring this message and to spread it and get awareness that so many people can um, to get behind and understand. And what we're trying to do with all the other groups out there, with the longevity and anti-aging and scientists and the researchers, we're trying to bring them under one voice. It's kind of like when America was forming. We had 13 separate colonies, but they wanted to unify because they were able to get things done so much faster and better and be more powerful that way. And so with Immortalis, based on the constitution of the prime law, which would ban initiatory force, we want to unify all these people out there, the business heroes of society, the researchers, those heroes of society. We want to bring them together and unify them under one voice, to be able to get things done so much faster and to allow them to be free to pursue their own areas. So we're not necessarily trying to say this is the way. We're not trying to say really you have to do things a certain way. What we're trying to do is just unify all these voices so they can pursue their own paths, and the prime law and Immortalis can protect them. So I kind of see the prime law and Immortalis as their bodyguards, so to speak, where they can come into Immortalis, the researchers can come into Immortalis and pursue their longevity research and to pursue their avenue, whether that's focusing on telomeres, whether that's kind of resetting your biological clock, whether that's resetting your stem cells or cloning. Whatever avenue they want to pursue, we want to protect them. We want to protect them from other bodies out there, from other rule of man, force-backed societies that block and prevent progress. We want to prevent them. We want to prevent the blocking of their progress. We want to create a container, a society where they can be free and they can go out there and innovate and create rapid breakthroughs and bring us cures to fatal diseases and to aging and to eventually cure death. We want to free them to pursue that. But right now, as is, they can't. Their hands are tied. For I was speaking with a girl pursuing um, a promising path for anti-aging uh, through cloning technology, and she was telling me that they need a place they can go to where they won't be held back because they're stuck. Their hands are tied. They're forced to work with one hand and one leg tied behind their back because they could soar. They could soar, but they can't as is because there's nowhere out there that lets them pursue their research without all these regulations slowing and killing progress. And at that point, funding falls apart too. And because instead of being able to create cures to diseases in 6 months or so, it's taking them 10 years. So at a certain point, investors will say it's not worth it. It's not worth it. And that's where things fall apart. And so what we're trying to do is say, hey, we think of these guys as these researchers as the heroes who actually solve problems, and they're the only ones who actually bring values to society. And we want to say to them that come under the prime law and join Immortalis and our prime law coalition, and we will protect you. And we want you to do what you do best. And we welcome you. And we need you, actually. Society needs you. Humanity needs you. We need those geniuses of society to bring us cures to fatal diseases and aging, to bring us more values. We need more businessmen to bring us more values at a faster pace. And so that's kind of the whole premise of what we're trying to do. We want to attract these people and say, you are now free. You are free to pursue your research, your ideas, your innovations, your breakthroughs. For the first time, you are free.
Fantastic. That leads me actually to a question. I think it's a really important question for us to ask and to answer, and that is, how is it that we know that now is the right time for Immortalis, the network state project, and eventually leading into physical, geological country with sovereignty? Why do we know that right now, at this time in history, is the right time to pursue this and do it? Why had it not been done before? Why shouldn't we wait to do it in the future? And I know from talking to you previously that you've been to an event in Singapore where a lot of people are working not just in the longevity field, but in other fields that are going to totally revolutionize how we live as a society, as humans. And coupled with that, I've been to an event this past September in Anaheim, right outside of Los Angeles, where it was a longevity event. A lot of people were working on different avenues there, and they all came together to talk about what they're doing. So maybe we could spend a few minutes and talk about some of these things, some of these people we talk to, some of the things they're doing, and how we know that now is the right time, that they need the protection that the Prime Law can offer, that Immortalis as a country could offer them as a sanctuary to go to pursue their research and get it done fast.
Yeah. So the first thing is, so you asked the big question, why now? So it first took the whole psychological, philosophical groundwork and developments of my father and grandfather. It took their whole lives to be able to lay the groundwork and foundation for something like this. Back to my previous example of Ayn Rand's term, existence exists. It took her entire lifetime to be able to come up with that, identification, that breakthrough. And so it took the philosophical and psychological groundwork of the neo-tech philosophy, um, and then the neo-think applications system from my father to be able to come up with the prime law. The prime law is, you need the actual law that will banish and permanently end the rule of man and initiatory force. And so we have the prime law now. And so now with that, with the prime law, we can almost now really take action and implement this in the real world. And other pressures that are happening, almost survival pressures, are happening right now with unrest in the Middle East. This is kind of how world wars start. And and we see the vicious cycle always happening of the rule of man corrupting, ending in tyranny, dictatorships, war, revolutions, and things like that. And so we may be in World War III right now, and we just don't fully know it. Maybe a few decades from now, they'll look back in the history books and say, yeah, it's in 2024 or 2023, World War III started. And so there's so much unrest and going on right now. We see America starting to slip into almost tyranny. We see America starting to slip, the freedom capital of the world. We see freedom starting to degrade. I mean, the hallmark of freedom is your First Amendment right of freedom of speech and freedom of press, and we see that degrading. And so all these elements going on out there in the world right now are pointing to the fact that we need the prime law. We need a prime law nation. We need Immortalis right now. There's no more waiting around. We cannot wait for any longer. We need to act now. We need to bring this into the world, and we need to unify all these voices out there to actually make this happen. And even more, also importantly, so my grandfather's identification was that preventing the loss of conscious life was mankind's greatest responsibility. We need to cure aging now. within our lifetimes. We need the cure now. We need to be able to prevent the loss of conscious life now, within our lifetimes, not 50 years from now, not with a new generation. We need to do this now. And there's only one way that this can happen within our lifetimes, is if these researchers and scientists are let loose to do what they do best. We need to free them to pursue their research, to get us the cures, to solve the problems now. And, throughout the last several decades, there's been all these promising avenues in the anti-aging and longevity field. When my father was growing up and when I was growing up too, I'd see all these breakthroughs after breakthroughs. And I'm like, in 20 years, we're going to have the cure to aging. And yet, time keeps passing and we still don't have the definite solution to curing aging and curing death. Why? Why? With all these breakthroughs, with all these innovations going on in that field, why don't we have it yet? And if you look deeply enough, if you study this, all roads lead back to initiatory force and force-backed regulations in the regulatory state, holding back progress, preventing progress, and outright blocking and killing progress. Because there is not incompetence. There's not incompetence with the people in these geniuses of society today. There's not incompetence. It's the lack of them being able to just freely pursue what they want to pursue, to get the funding, and have investors being able to see, to know that they're going to achieve these results quickly now, without dragging this on through regulation and litigation, and to just get us all these cures and all these breakthroughs and innovations faster within our lifetime. That's why now. That's why now. We need to do this in our lifetime. We feel the urgency. We need to do this now. The state of the world has gone is not great. We need to do this now.
Yes, and a really good example of progress being held back. I was at the conference in Los Angeles or Anaheim. It's called RADFest, Revolution Against Aging and Death. Super cool. But there was a lady on there on stage who was talking about the research her and her company are doing, and they were ready for human trials on a certain type of genetic editing. And they've gone through the animal testing. They've gone through the whole correct process, got approval. And then they came and said, hey, we're ready to do human trials. We've got all these results. We're ready to go. Everything's looking good. Green light, right? And the one big agency out there that holds back this area most said, no, actually, we want you to go back to animal testing, even though you already did that. We want you to go back there and do $10 million worth more of research and animal testing. And as you were saying earlier, the funding is not there for that. When things take too much time, investors aren't going to get their return on investment in a reasonable time, and they're not going to put their money into it. And so that whole project, which is very promising, is in a holding pattern now for no reason other than someone within this agency decided, nah, we want to send you back a few steps. And that's just one company dealing with that. I heard company after company after company over an entire weekend talk about how close they are if only they could get approval to do certain trials, or how close they were if they could only get the funding to pay for what's way more expensive than it should be. There's a lot of these trials that are only as expensive as they are because of the regulation that's involved. And there's a guy who came on stage, and someone from the audience asked him, how far away are we from having a viable cure to aging and death? And he kind of went through a lengthy explanation, but the gist of it was, with things going the way they are, if we didn't hit any more roadblocks, in his humble opinion, not humble, in his opinion, we were 5 to 10 years away from a viable, definite cure to aging. As things are now, if no more roadblocks were hit. But the holdback, he went on to say, was funding. There wasn't enough funding for it. And this particular guy, I think his name was Aubrey de Grey, he works through nonprofit organizations. He had the SENS Foundation before, and he has another one that he's working with now. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But he's one of the guys who has a study now that's very, very promising, has gone through certain steps already and is looking great, but is in a holding pattern because of regulation and funding. So to add to what you're saying, why now is the right time, just from my experience of talking to some of these people and hearing them present from stage, we're right there on the cusp of having that. A lot of people are saying now, are we going to be the last generation to die? Or are we going to be the first generation to not die? And that's how fine of a line we're on right now. That's how intense it really is in the world right now. And, just hearing person after person say essentially the same thing, we're right there, we're so close, we just need a little more freedom. That's why I'm so behind this Immortalis project and why I wanted to bring you on to talk about this as the first episode on the Immortalist here. Because we need people to see how close this really is. And we need the people who are working on it to realize, we need to get our egos out of the way. Everyone needs to work on their avenue that they're working on because we need all of that. The human biological body is it's a complex system. So we need all these different things. So we have to get ego out of the way and realize we all want the same thing. We all want to live. We all want to eliminate death. And if we can unify on that point right there, that we all just want to live, that voice is going to be really loud, as you were saying earlier, and it's going to be heard. And Immortalis, as that grows, it's a network state now, but as it grows and gets more funding and people supporting it, we'll be able to speed up the timeline of actually having physical land where we can form a sovereign country. And that is the ultimate sanctuary of protection, where these geniuses from around the world who are so close now will be able to come to that sanctuary with complete freedom to be able to finish their research and get it done. And a distinction I had made in my mind while at this event in September is that, yes, we might be 5 to 10 years away from having a viable cure to aging, as things are right now if nothing changes. But he didn't say anything about the price of it once it was done. And, if we look throughout history, other than the computer industry, which, as you stated, did its thing because of a lack of regulation. But if we look at everything else that is heavily regulated, any new evolution of something that comes out, any new anything really, when it first comes out, is really expensive. It's only affordable to the super wealthy. And even then, it doesn't work as good as it could. And then over time, it gets more and more commercialized until eventually, finally, it's available and cheap enough that even the common man can afford it. And we need to speed that process up. We don't want just the super rich to live forever. They should live forever too, but everyone should have that option. So the distinction I made is, yeah, he's saying we might be 5 to 10 years away, but what's further off, even if that happens, as things are today, commercial biological immortality is still further away than that even, because people would be priced out, and we don't want that.
Yes.
Yeah, so really the point of this channel to me and the project of Immortalis, that's, you even said it, is bringing everyone's voice into one really loud voice, and we all need to get behind it. Not Immortalis by itself, but we need to all be behind the cause of wanting to live. And, not forcing people to live if they don't want to. There's people out there, I've met plenty of them, and I'm sure everyone listening has, I'm sure you have, that they're presented with the idea of like, hey, we're pretty close to curing aging and death as humans. We don't have to die anymore. And they're like, well, I don't know about that. I think I probably do want to die at some point, and sometimes it has to do with spiritual or religious beliefs or what have you. And to me, I think that's great. Uh, but as much as people who think along those lines shouldn't be forced to live, we shouldn't be forced to die. The option should be there. And I think that's what Immortalis does. It's going to lay the groundwork where people can come discover the cure to aging and give people the option. And everyone needs to be behind that. Everyone should be behind the option of life or death. And if people could just see what the potential is, it's not just living, it's also how we live. It's going to increase the standard of living because, as you were saying earlier, businesses and inventors and entrepreneurs, they're going to come in to Immortalis as well for the freedom, and they're going to be able to create so much faster, and it's going to be so much cheaper. And we've all seen in the movies like the super futuristic things of like hologram phones and things in your eyes and just really cool super society type stuff. We could have that. It's not such a futuristic thing. It could be here also within our lifetime. And so it's not just about living forever in society as it is. It's about living forever in a super rapidly evolving society that's closer to like Star Trek or any of these sci-fi things we see that are really cool that people in secret, when they think about it, they would love to experience those things. So that's what it's about for me. It's everyone coming together and standing up and saying, you know what? No, we don't want to deal with uh, these powercrats who, they want all the power and they want control over people, and they don't want to evolve and change because their power is based on the system as it is. So they're going to literally go out there and block progress on purpose just that way they can maintain their power. And that's really what we're standing up against in the human lifespan and longevity and immortality. That, to me and to a lot of us, that's the most important element of that right now, but it's so much bigger than that.
Right. Yeah. And
Uh,
like what I was what I was talking about earlier, you're talking about how all this incredible technology is within our reach, and how we are so close to the cures, of curing death, and um, and and so it doesn't just apply with, like you were saying, to the health industry. It applies to all the industries. When progress is when there's a container, when progress is not held back, it will explode the breakthroughs and development in all industries, where you get greater and greater and greater values at lower and lower and lower costs. Back to my example about Peter Thiel saying in the engineering fields, computer science was just one of those industries, the only industry that really didn't get blocked. And so we would be having innovations and breakthroughs and greater values in technology in all industries, whether that's anywhere from housing to clothing to energy, everything. And we would experience abundance. It's something we would experience a great technological revolution with uh, with when we actualize the prime law in our Immortalis nation, where all industries and researchers, scientists, and businessmen won't They're no longer held back. The abundance that we would get, the technology of greater value at lower and lower costs, it's almost like people don't fully understand that. And I see with AI, Sam Altman and other people who are high up there in AI, they're talking about how we're going to be entering almost an age of abundance with this technology. And that doesn't apply just to technology when you understand how initiatory force blocks progress everywhere. And so we are so close, but why aren't we there yet? Why aren't we there yet? And the common denominator and the answer to that is because initiatory force, blocking regulation, preventing funding. And so that's where we're going with Immortalis. And um, and as it relates to anti-aging and people wanting to live forever, a big identification that my father in his works has made was, growing up with my grandfather's lifetime work, basically identifying that mankind's greatest responsibility is to prevent the loss of conscious life. My father, when talking to people about that, about living forever, he experienced, back in the 70s and 80s, when talking about this, that people's eyes would glaze over when he would talk about that. And a big reason which he identified was that people didn't want to live forever, some of them. And the reason behind that is because a lot of them weren't living lives. A lot of people were living stagnant lives and experiencing stagnation, where they were in a routine rut. They were in specialized jobs, and they're not in a value creation vector driven mode, where they're using the power of their mind, the essence of their mind, for creation and creating values for others. And so the first part of his career was creating the tools, the thinking tools, and the thinking tools and the business tools and the breakthroughs and frameworks of how to create and live an extraordinary life so that you would actually want to live forever. So to create the demand that more and more people would want to actually live forever and can see themselves living longer and longer, happier and happier, and healthier. Because a big when you ask somebody if they want to live forever, a lot of times they think, is the life that I'm living right now, could I see myself doing that for eternity? And for some people, the answer is no. And it's so sad. It's so sad because they're in a stagnant routine rut and trapped. And so what my father did with Neothink is show people how to create an extraordinary life. And another reason, which is a little bit going off on a tangent, which we could get into another time, but another reason why people aren't living in a value creation vector driven mode is because of the society that we live in today, where to create a business and to actually create things, we're not in a society that promotes that because of force-backed regulations and the regulatory state in the hand just getting heavier and heavier and heavier, where it becomes easier to just get a stagnant job and work a 9 to 5 in fluorescent lighting that drains the color and life out of your world. And so if we're living in a container that promotes creation, that doesn't hold back and almost punishes you to try to be a value creator and a business hero or a researcher or a scientist to go out there and make breakthroughs, and having to spend 10 years what could take you 6 months to develop. It just blocks and destroys the motivation behind creating, behind living these such exciting and exhilarating types of lives in a value creation vector driven mode. And so, um, and so with, and so that was kind of the first path that my father took of creating the demand and the demand for people wanting to live forever. And now we're, as actually people are starting to live greater lives, it could be it could definitely be improved a lot more, but now there's more demand on anti-aging and living longer and living happier and living healthier. And so and now we need the societal conditions to actually get those cures to fatal diseases and aging and eventually death. And so the prime law which banishes initiatory force as the supreme law, as the constitution of Immortalis, we can finally actualize and achieve all of these things within our lifetime. And so that's basically our main goal, our main driving force, is we want to unify all these voices out there, and we want to bring them in to and protect them under the prime law in Immortalis, to let them be able to pursue happiness and pursue their passions and pursue research, live exhilarating lives, create values indefinitely and solve problems. And we're going to protect them and um, and unify these voices. So that's where we're at right now, and that's our urgency, because we need to make this happen ASAP.
Yes. So, if someone wanted to learn more about Immortalis, where would they go? Would that be the joinimmortalis.com website?
Yes, if you want to learn more about Immortalis and what we're doing, and if you're just curious, go to joinimmortalis.com, where you can find out more information. You can join our community, and you can just simply check out what we're doing. And if you want to take that next step, you can join us and join this cause. And just go to joinimmortalis.com. It's on the screen, or you'll find it in the link. You'll find the link in the description below. And that's how you can find out more, and get involved.
Fantastic. Thank you, Wallace. And to the viewers, you, as this channel develops and grows, we're going to be showcasing a lot of what's going on around the world, that different projects that people are working on. So, this isn't just about Immortalis and what Wallace is doing, and that I am fully supportive of. I think everyone should check that out. It's not just about this one network state project, though. This is about humanity. It's about living. So we're going to be talking to a lot of people from around the world who are involved in this, and we're going to be, even if we're not talking to them and bringing them on like I brought on Wallace, we will still be showcasing them, talking about what they're doing, and giving them a spotlight, giving them a little bit of recognition, because it's important that we all support each other in this. We're a small group right now. It's bigger than it was 10 years ago and 20 years ago, the longevity industry and enthusiasm, but it's still a really small group, so we really need to support each other, and that's what we will be doing on this channel. So be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it everywhere. And as we grow, things are going to get better and better and better. The next show is November 10th at 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern time. And that will be a live show. I will be interviewing James Stroll, who has been an immortality activist since the mid 70s. He started People Unlimited, which is a group of his in Arizona, and has a really big following there, and has grown and started a yearly event that's called RADFest that I was at in September. It stands for Revolution Against Aging in Death. And what he does with that is he brings on the scientists and the researchers and the people working to this. He brings them all to the same place, puts them all on stage, and lets them talk about what they're doing so people can start to get more excited. So I was very happy to get the opportunity to talk with him when I was in Anaheim, California this past September. And on November, he will be coming on live. I'll be able to ask him some questions. I talk to him about his history in this field, some of the things he's experienced going back to the mid 70s, and what he sees as what's going on now and how close we really are from his direct connection and relationship with these scientists. So be sure to tune in on November 10th. And that concludes this show. Wallace, do you have anything you want to say before we close out?
Thank you for having me on, Cody. I think we had an excellent discussion, and everybody watching and listening, make sure you show this channel and Cody support by going and attending live and watching the video, liking and sharing his channel. But make sure you attend the November 10th interview with James Stroll. And that's really exciting. We're all supporting Cody here, and we want you to show your support as well by watching that, showing up live on November 10th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. You could find, I believe, the live stream. It would be on your channel, Cody.
Yes.
Yes. So go to the YouTube channel, 1 p.m. Pacific time on November 10th, and watch that interview live. And make sure you follow Cody's channel, the Immortalist channel. Make sure you subscribe, share it with your friends, like this video, and comment. It all helps boost the algorithm and gets more attention and awareness to our mission and our cause. And that's what you can do to support it.
All right. Thank you, Wallace. I hope you enjoy the show, everybody. We'll see you on November 10th.
Yes. Thanks, Cody. Bye, everybody.